Hi, this is Sosene. Thank you for joining me again. Now, I have a question for you. While I'm on this role of the importance of having ideas that are big enough to make us feel uncomfortable and make us feel insecure, those ideas will create a level of emotional reaction which consist of two major emotions. One is fear that I might fail, fear that I might say something that other people do not agree with, and then doubt. Doubt is where you question your own ability and you question whether you're good enough. This is the idea that I struggle with when I started, and that is the idea that in our culture where I grew up, our cultures was never used in any form of celebration of God. It was always used as a form of celebrating cultures and festivals, celebrations, and all that outside of the church. And I had an idea that why not approach the idea that we can bring the cultural element of our people, music, costumes, storytelling, and dance and music into the church so that it can be a part of the Christian experience. So I decided I was going to take this on. And like I said in my video of starting the idea of the missionary movement out of the Pacific, it was the same, but in not it was so much more personal because it involves the music, the dances, and the music of our islands. When I first started this in the village where we were at, we're in the middle of the whole village, and there's a sound that you can hear the drums, the wooden drums beating, and that is associated with cultural celebrations outside of the church. But we were doing this with the idea that we can bring this into the church. And so there was a lot of reaction towards it. There was a lot of history. And I remember talking to my young people that were with me, and I asked them, I said, could we go back and review who told us that we couldn't do our cultural expressions of colors, costuming, and music and dance? Who told us that we couldn't do that in the church? And I went back myself and realized that there's more written history out of the Hawaiian culture, because at that time, the Hawaiian culture has basically tabooed the doing of anything that is Hawaiian as an expression of the church. Now, that may be very difficult for some people to realize, but I was there seeing the struggle that some of these amazing Christian young people who were talented, and yet their skill and their cultural skill set was not honored in the expression of the Christian church. I had a friend who asked me when we were talking in the islands, and he said he was a missionary in the Marshall Islands, in the Micronesian Islands, and he was asking me, why is it hard for us to find Christian expressions of culture? And I said, because I remember telling him, I said, I don't know the full assessment of that, but there is a mindset that when the Western church came to the islands, they established a tradition of what the church is to be. You wear a tie, even in the heat of the day, you wear a tie, and you come in proper attire, and you come in, and even the church service is arranged as if you were living in where the missionaries came from. So a lot of their tradition, as good as their message was, they were successful in eliminating anything that has to do with culture from any expression of the Christian faith. So that was my idea, was to bring this into the church. And like I said, it was difficult, but we started with practicing and getting our young people to know that it is okay to do this. It was pretty tough in the beginning. And I remember some of the young people in conversations, they were saying, so saying that we came to be missionaries. We didn't come to learn how to dance again. That's what we did when we were in the world, when we were doing things, and when we were in church. That was the way it was supposed to be. So how come we are doing this? And I said, because. And then I brought my experience in Hawaii of being in international mission agencies, where there was what we call in those days the creative dance, where you sing worship songs, but you do creative dance that kind of the mixture of sign language and all that, but it was in a form of swaying and moving and dancing and all that. That was what we call creative dance in the church, the Christian church. And then I remember going back to the islands, and I realized that much of this was going on within a lot of what we call evangelical Pentecostal churches. Was they even went so far as to forbid any cultural expressions, including honoring people coming in with what we call the kava ceremony. And the kava ceremony is the way in which our people will express how important you are if you're visiting. We established this celebration called the kava ceremony, where the chiefs of the village would come together and welcome you into the village as a way of honoring you. That was taboo even in the church at that time. And I'm talking about it was taboo. Nothing. So as we were doing our own progression, we decided, instead of going to the church, let's take our program to New Zealand and go and see what the Maori response would be, what the Pacific Islanders were doing in Auckland, New Zealand, because New Zealand at that time was known as the Polynesian town, Polynesian city. So we took the trip to New Zealand, about 18, 19 of us, and we were booked into schools, high school, college in New Zealand, and we were working full-time all throughout every day. We go from one school to another, from the north side of New Zealand to all the way to the middle into Auckland. And then in the evening, we would go into Maori maraes and perform in what would be considered a mixture of a church and this cultural thing that was coming in to invade the church. But my goal at that time was to bridge the gap, bring the two together. And what happened when we went through New Zealand, we realized that there was a greater amount of honoring, preferring to have these expressions be done in the church. And as a matter of fact, many of the young people who came to the performances were astonished when we tell them that this is a Christian group. And and so it was a real interesting, because the churches was, at that time, there was a church in Auckland that was very much the church where a lot of Polynesians attend. And they were getting a wind of this. And I had some of the young people who came to me and said, hey, we really want this to be a part of our church, but the pastor has said no. So you do the same thing. You you provide an avenue for those young people to find their expressions, and then at the same time shift through some of the accepted norm in the church that will receive some of the element of the culture. And that was how it was introduced. Needless to say, many years later, when we were moving from Samoa to Hawaii, we went back and realized that this was beginning to sweep through the churches in the islands. There were women dancing in the church as a form of worship and appreciation of their cultural skills. And I don't want to overlook the idea that there are there are things that were not necessarily all pure, because there are some things in the culture where there's a lot of worship of ancestors and idols that the church was concerned about. So they were putting a taboo on that. And so we had to start with what they can accept as the norm. When we came to Hawaii, I think I mentioned in one of the videos, when we came to Hawaii, the hula that is done in the church was done sitting down on a chair. Can you imagine? I mean, I remember seeing that for the first time and I thought, hello, the hula without moving and swaying of the hips and the beautiful dance that goes with it would not be hula without standing up and moving back and forth. So that we had an encounter with a lot of, even the people that were doing this, they were saying, we cannot do what you're doing. We cannot do what you're doing. But at the same time, I had a mentor who was the founder of the organization we were working with, who was very open-minded in the idea that it's possible. It's possible to bring the cultures together. Let each culture contribute to the worship of Jesus, and the world will be a better place. This is not to say we're coming and you need to change. We're bringing our contribution to an expression of the body of Christ that is different. And it was good to go back to the islands, because I used to go back and forth just to get an idea of what was going on. And one time I went through New Zealand and I came up to the islands, and I was blessed to hear that the church were having dance teams. The church was seeing the value of the cultural input into beautifying the worship of the church. Beautiful. It was beautiful, and it was widely received. So that was one idea that I look back now at 73 years old and look back in my 20s and 30s when we were pioneering this idea that we can bring the dance, the story of the islands, and the music and the color and the costumes, and bring it to contribute to saying Jesus is Lord. Not only Lord over us, but Lord over our own culture that we represent coming in. And needless to say, that was the beginning of a whole new flow. Just like I mentioned on my video with turning the mindset around for Pacific Islanders to think of being a missionary sending nation instead of a missionary receiving nation, we were also seeing this breakthrough of celebration, happiness, joy. And and then the next step for us was to go to North America to work amongst the Native Americans. I remember that very well, because we were informed that as our team was coming into places like South Dakota, that there were some people who were really against the idea of that, because you can't bring you can't bring the culture, because that's what we told Native Americans. They can't bring their drums and their headpiece and their colors into the church. It would be pagan. And so what we did is we came and we we were hosted by the Sioux Nation in South Dakota, and we decided we want to do the whole shebang, do the cover ceremony, and it was us telling them this is how our people would receive you if you are important to them. They will come and they will sit around with the chiefs, and then they will do the cover ceremony to honor you and say, you are welcome in our community. So we did that for the Native Americans. We didn't know who to honor first, but that was part of the cultural expression, is to bring that expression of welcome. And it's now a part of the expression of the evening event that has to do with the church expression. And then after that, we said we came from the islands bringing with us our color, our feather, our dance, our drumming, our music to honor you. And we discovered that in the islands, God said, what we have is not evil, what we have is pure. And we brought that to you so that we can celebrate you. This is how the idea of when every culture contribute their values into the expression of the church, the world will become a better place because there is room for all. And so that was, we had teams traveling around the world, and today there are teams still traveling around the world in evangelism circles where the church is coming together to celebrate Jesus. And instead of just coming and singing hymns and worship, they're coming and seeing these Polynesian dancers and their drums and their ukulele, and they are dancing on the stage to declare the celebration of our people. And in doing so, we're soliciting their expressions to be contributing. And so it was an incredible time. We were able to, I was there first when we were in South Dakota, hosted by the Sioux Nation, and we had that particular evening where we did the cover ceremony, and we did the music and the dance presentation. And then we said, at the end, we said, well, here we are. We are bringing the Jesus we met in the islands, and he told us that our culture is not evil. Our culture is good. And we want to bring this to celebrate with you. And then we invite the Native American to consider the claims of Jesus for their lives. Some of them were Christians already, but they were scared like hell to even think of the idea that they can bring their drums into the church. So when we gave the invitation, almost all the chiefs who were there in our cover ceremony stood up and they said, if Jesus is this to you, we want this Jesus to be ours. And so it was an amazing, and we've seen this over and over and over all across America with cities. We went to Tampa, I live in Tampa, and we went to the mayor's office and asked them if we can do a cover ceremony and bring our drums, and told them this is an expression of God that we discovered and we want to bring it to the people. It solicited a response, and the response was, if you guys can do this, what is in my culture that I am ashamed of bringing to God? By the way, this is one of the big ideas that we pioneered. And then we went to Korea, we went to China, we went to different places. We went to Singapore, we went to different places, and we saw the same response. What would it be like if the world today would have every cultural expressions contribute to the worship of Jesus? I think it would be a better place. The world will be a world of peace and a place of fellowship and relationship. And so that was one of the big ideas that I championed when I was in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then we train other young people to carry the vision. We went to South Africa, and the same thing happened in South Africa. The Zulu people, the native people of South Africa decided, Zulu people decided, hey, if the Polynesians can do this, why not us? And the same with Native Americans. I was hosted by several groups that in Native Americans inviting me to come and talk about the journey and what we were processing and how it now becomes normal. If you go to Polynesia today, you will see some of the dance, some of the music, some of the expressions that are now accepted and be a part of the traditional worship of God rather than just the hymns and the traditional church as we knew it. And wow, what a beautiful thing to see. And so if you find any value in this video, I have more videos on my podcast and playlist that I would invite you to take a time to just review them, view them, and see if it speaks something to you. Because culture is a way of life. It's a way in which God designed us. You know, we went through America, and the common question was, now we see your culture, and it's obvious, but what is our culture? What is our culture? So the question is asked because people are interested in how they can bring their own unique expression to contribute, to do something, to make something happen, to make the expression of Jesus more real, rather than just the traditional hand raise and all of that. I had a, if you're interested in this, I would love for you to please subscribe. Come follow me by subscribing to my video and share and like. You go down below and do that. Now, I wanted to know where you are watching this video from and how it is coming across to you. And maybe, like I said before in other videos, when fear and courage, and doubt meet, fear, it might be rejected, fear, it might not be good enough, fear of what other people think, and doubt that we may not be able to deliver the promise. We've seen that promise, and many young people today are traveling around the world. We have teams consist of young Africans doing their own dance, doing their own cultural expressions. We have young people in Brazil doing the capoeira and all that. My boys, because they part Brazilian and part Samoan, went to Brazil and they love the Brazilian capoeira. And now I gotta make a confession, because my confession is I can't sing and I can't dance. But somehow I was given the idea to champion. And so some of us may not have the skill set or even any skill at all. But if you have that in you, where fear and doubt met, for me, that's where fear and doubt, because I was afraid that if people would ask me, what is your dancing background? I have none. And I can't, my boys laugh at me because I don't even have, I fake, moving around my shoulders and all that, but I have no dancing skills. The funny thing about it is, let me just give you another story, because this is when we started this in the islands. My ex-wife was a Brazilian. She was born Brazilian and adopted by a family from America. So she was, I guess, half Brazilian, 99% Brazilian and 1 or 2% American. And she is a great dancer. Well, here's what happened. she danced with our first group that we put together. When we went to New Zealand, we had my ex who was amazing lady, amazing. And we had a Native American from North America who was an Indian who was with us. And they danced, they did all of that. And it was an adjustment for them to be able to do these different things. Now, I would love to update you and give you some updates, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to find videos from some of these teams that are traveling. We have a team out of Kansas City that travels the world all year long. I was talking to one of their leaders yesterday, and she said, this year we're going to be in the South Pacific, and then we come back and go to Norway, we go to Sweden, we go to South Africa. And all of that, these are young people from the islands who have taken on their talent and their skill. The other side of this is many of these young people, they may not have the ability to preach like many other people who like to be missionaries, but they have the ability to demonstrate through the love of their culture. And when they dance, something breaks through for them. And so we decided one of the ways that we can do this is to create an avenue where they can go and earn a living out of doing cultural stuff on the side while they're still doing all of these ministry side, so that we can demonstrate to the world what it was like. Amazing stuff. And one of these days I'm going to do a scriptural basis for what we did, and take you through the scripture and see the pattern of cultures and how God designed it to be. But in the meantime, this would be enough for now. The big idea was, is it possible to bring something that was considered evil by people of that culture? It takes a lot of courage to embrace that. It takes a lot of humility to say, maybe we were wrong, but let's celebrate together. So that is part of why big ideas, and why it is required for someone to take the action necessary when doubt and fear are overwhelming. Thank you so much for listening, and we have other videos that you can take a look at to help you. Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.